about to publish the catalogue raisonné of Chinese and Japanese works of art. The aim is to make a survey of that particular part of the collection to ensure that it's in good condition, to photograph it, to describe it accurately, to explain it to people who are interested. The collection of Chinese and Japanese works of art comprises a little over 2,000 objects and includes porcelains, lacquers, jades, silk hangings, cloisonné enamels and even musical instruments. Principally, it's down to William III and Mary II in the end of the 17th century, collecting mainly blue and white porcelain, which was of course extremely fashionable. And also George IV, he was obsessed with Chinese works of art and built up a very large collection. And also Queen Mary, who in the beginning of the 20th century bought a great deal of jades and also porcelains. So in order to prepare these objects for the catalogue, the author makes a selection and then they're brought into the workshop either for a light clean, which in many examples was all that was necessary, but certain objects required more in-depth conservation. In this film we're going to be looking at 4 objects prepared for the catalogue. We're looking at one of the small pagodas. There are 3 sizes of pagodas, a lacquer box and a Chinese enamel cloisonné vase and a Chinese nodding head figure. The lacquer boxes were made for George, Prince of Wales, later George IV, at the beginning of the 19th century.
The gold's very stable, just had some surface dirt, so I've cleaned that along with cleaning the object in a hole and taking a conservation approach, just very minimal retouching with the gold, just for photography purposes, just using gold powders. We use paint because, or acrylic paint I should say, because it's reversible. In the Orient they would use Urushi lacquer again to replace, but we won't be doing that here because anything we do needs to be reversible. It's probably taken about 2 months really, just to take it all apart, lifting areas, consolidation, cleaning, making sure each layer was taken apart and cleaned and then put back together.
The aims of conservation for any object in the Royal Collection really is firstly to ensure that it is stable, is safe. Secondly, most of these objects live in palaces, therefore they need to appear appropriate to their palace setting. The cloisonné vase is made with tiny fragments of glass which are set into a brass frame, and the glass is then baked to a very high temperature and this melts and fuses with the brass frame, and this is what provides the decoration. The vase was given in 1896 to Queen Victoria.
We can see here very clearly the difference between a vase which has been cleaned and one that hasn't. And the rather fuzzy surface to the decoration is caused by tarnish building up around the brass wires, which has migrated into the edges of the glass surface. Now the conservation really involves cleaning back this surface and the brass, removing the tarnish to reveal the surface in its original state.
The nodding head figures were almost certainly acquired by the Prince of Wales, later George IV.
So far on the back of this figure I have cut back the old repairs and I applied more material where necessary just to bring up the right level. Before that I did consolidate the clay just to protect it and also to act as a barrier layer, so if I'm adding any more material then it's easier to remove it without damaging the clay. I'm smoothing down the fills further just to bring the level down a tiny bit to prepare it for the paint application. And the other thing I'm doing today is painting in the fills and applying a very minimal amount of paint, just feathering it in to this whole area to bring the whole colour together so it doesn't look so patchy, it just looks like one yellow.
pagodas in porcelain generally only made for export to the West, very much inspired by the famous pagoda at Nanjing, which was known in printed form in the 17th century. The pagodas are constructed in separable form, so you have about 7 or 8 individual tiers, so each balcony rests upon the one below it, and then you have the roof that sits on top. The pagoda was bought in France at the beginning of the 19th century.
You can see here that there are 2 main sections that have been missing. This upper section of fretwork, which has been replaced and repaired by taking a mould of another section and using that mould to create an impression around which to form this replacement section. I'm going to use a cold glaze retouching medium and powder pigments based around these 3 colours, this terracotta red, a yellow ochre and a slightly brighter red lead. Everything has been replaced and retouched, and really it all looks as good as probably the day that it was made.
This collection very much embodies that view of the East seen from the West, from Britain in particular, and similarly the view and the relations through objects from China and Japan of Britain. You can see these objects in Windsor Castle in the State Apartments there, in Buckingham Palace during the summer opening in the State Apartments, Hampton Court, Kensington Palace, and also the Palace of Holyrood House in Edinburgh.